In today's video, we cover some of the most harrowing shark encounters in recent years. From a bull shark ambush on a surfer, to a tiger shark's deadly strike on a lone diver. But first, we begin with a chilling account of a 20-foot great white shark that grabbed two little girls off a boat. It was January 12, 2005, and the summer sun glared off the pale green swells beyond Gansbai's reef line on South Africa's southern coast. A small aluminum dinghy, bright yellow against the dark Atlantic water, drifted in the mild wind. From the shore, the craft was just another dot on the ocean, but out there, a predator had already closed the distance. Hannah Marshall, 9, and her younger sister Emily, 7, had come with their father Paul and Uncle Steve for a simple fishing trip. The family had driven down from Cape Town the night before, staying in a rented cabin. Paul, a self-employed mechanic, had taken time off during the school holidays to give the girls their first taste of open sea fishing. Both wore orange foam life jackets, faded from years of storage, and baseball caps to keep the sun off their faces. Hannah was the taller, asking constant questions, while Emily leaned over the bow rail to stare into the water. Their father and uncle had grown up fishing South African waters, and saw no reason to worry. The dinghy had been hired that morning from a local operator who mentioned that big sharks had been sighted recently. Old hands at the ramp told Paul and Steve the same thing. Remnants from nearby cage diving operations and fishing boats had been dumped offshore, drawing them in. One man even pointed at the dinghy's bright paint and said the yellow would pull sharks in line like a lure. The brothers had laughed it off. They were barely outside the reef and the water was calm, with only a slow, rolling swell. Paul reasoned that if something did show up, they could simply start the outboard and head in. The ocean beyond Gansbai was a mix of turquoise and steel blue, with patches of drifting kelp and occasional dark shadows sliding under the surface. Small silverfish darted near the hull. The reef sat a few hundred yards behind them, the white foam of breaking waves marking its edge. There was no other boat in sight. Great white sharks are known to frequent this coastline, especially during summer when fish are plentiful. Adults can exceed 20 feet in length and weigh over 4,000 pounds. Their strike is fast and explosive, often from below, using the element of surprise to disable large prey. In clear water, they may also investigate high-contrast colors, such as the bright yellow paint still common on small South African fishing boats. Their bite force measures over 4,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone instantly. These apex predators can detect electrical impulses from a beating heart hundreds of yards away, and sense a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water. By mid-morning, Paul and Steve had caught only one squid. The girls had been leaning forward for several minutes, fascinated by a cluster of jellyfish drifting under the bow. Steve, at the stern, noticed a disturbance in the water. First a faint shadow, then the smooth rise of a dorsal fin about 50 feet from the port side. It cut the surface briefly, then vanished. He called for the girls to come back, his voice sharper than usual. Hannah glanced over her shoulder but did not move. Emily giggled, pointing at something below. Steve had just started towards them when it happened. At 11:14 a.m., a massive great white surged from directly beneath the bow. Its head, nearly the width of the dinghy, erupted from the water in a vertical rush. The shark's jaws opened wide enough to engulf both children where they knelt. In one movement, it clamped down, the upper teeth closing over Hannah's shoulder and Emily's torso. The force rocked the dinghy hard to starboard. Paul, turning from the stern, lost his footing and slammed into the side rail. The shark dropped back into the water with its catch, submerging beneath the hull. Blood spread instantly in the foam at the bow. Paul scrambled forward, shouting their names. The boat pitched as the shark reappeared on the opposite side, thrashing violently, the white underside flashing in the sun. Steve swung an oar down onto its head twice before it rolled away and sank into deeper water. The surface calmed almost as quickly as it had erupted. According to them, both men stood frozen for several seconds before Paul lunged for the outboard's pull cord. His hands shook as he yanked it to life. They began moving toward the reef at full throttle, the dinghy shuddering in the swell. Neither spoke. The bow was streaked with blood, Emily's cap wedged under the rail. Hannah's life jacket, torn open at one seam, floated briefly in their wake before slipping under. When they reached the reef's edge, Paul kept the motor idling while Steve fumbled for the handheld VHF, his voice cracking as he sent a mayday to the nearest marina. A charter skipper half a mile away acknowledged first, relaying the position to the local marine rescue station. Search crews were dispatched within the hour. The first responders found only fragment parts of a foam life jacket, a single sandal, and a strip of fabric later identified as part of Emily's short. The area was scanned by helicopter for 2 days without further results. Conditions remained clear, but no shark was sighted again. The funerals were held quietly in Cape Town, attended only by close relatives and family friends. The media carried a few short reports, but no images. Marine authorities issued a public advisory for heightened shark activity along the Overberg coast, but did not pursue a cull, citing the rarity of such direct attack. Locals at the Gansby ramp still recall the bright yellow dinghy that went out that morning and came back missing its youngest passengers. Yet, even as the Marshall family's tragedy served as a grim reminder of the ocean's unpredictable fury, just 2 years earlier in Ballina, a carpenter would dismiss safety warnings, unaware that a bull shark was already circling beneath his board. It was August 5th, 2016, and the tide was running out of the Richmond River into the Pacific, carrying brown, debris-filled water past the sandbar at Ballina. Low morning clouds pressed against the coastline. Out past the breakers, 3 surfers waited for the next set. The estuary mouth was known for its strong shifting currents and the fish that moved with them. On this day, something larger was there too. Tyler Reed was a 24-year-old Ballina local and competent surfer who balanced weekday carpentry work with early morning sessions. He had been in the water at this spot since his teens, favoring it for the powerful breaks and smaller crowd. Reed was lean, with the muscle of someone used to lifting timber and carrying tools, and confident in the ocean to the point of dismissing most safety warnings. Friends described him as independent, sometimes blunt, but always ready to paddle out in questionable conditions if the waves were good. That morning, a council advisory had been posted along the foreshore, warning of murky water, poor visibility, and high shark activity risks following heavy rainfall. The previous night's downpour had pushed baitfish from the river into the open sea, and it was well known among locals that bull sharks followed them. When a friend mentioned the advisory, Tyler brushed it off, saying warnings were for tourists. The river mouth was part of his usual rotation, and he saw no reason to change plans. But Tyler likely didn't grasp the power of the apex hunter that dominated these waters. Bull sharks are among the few shark species that regularly enter fresh water, moving between rivers and the sea. These stout-bodied and aggressive predators can grow over 11 feet long and weigh more than 500 pounds. They're capable of short bursts of speed and often strike in low visibility water, relying on electroreception and sudden impact to disable prey. In river mouths where fish concentrate after rainfall, encounters become significantly more common. The estuary entrance was a shifting mix of river water and ocean swell, where sandbars rose and fell with the tide. Foam trailed from broken waves and scattered clumps of kelp moved with the current. Visibility was poor, less than 3 feet underwater, so the sand-colored bottom was only visible in shallow spots. Overhead, seabirds circled, occasionally diving to pick off small fish. From shore, the surfers looked small against the long green lines of the incoming set. By 7:30 a.m., Tyler had been in the lineup for about 20 minutes. He was about 40 yards from the nearest surfer, straddling his board and watching for the next wave. The other 2 surfers would later say they noticed no unusual movement, just the constant drift of foam and debris. Then, without warning, the surface behind Tyler lifted in a tight, fast swirl. At 7:32 a.m., a bull shark estimated at 10 feet in length struck from the side. Its head rose partly out of the water as its jaws clamped down across Tyler's lower torso, lifting him off the board. One surfer said it looked like he was jackknifed over the shark's snout before he disappeared into the churn. The impact rolled his board sideways, and Tyler hit the water with tremendous force. The shark released him briefly, then circled in a tight radius before surging in again. This time it bit into his upper thigh, shaking side to side with the violent thrashing motion sharks use to tear flesh from their prey. Blood spread quickly in the current, creating an expanding crimson cloud in the murky water. One of the other surfers began paddling hard toward him, slapping the water with his board to drive the shark off. The animal submerged and didn't resurface. The rescuer reached Tyler first, finding him face up but unresponsive. He rolled Tyler onto his own board, holding him across the deck while the third surfer steadied him and began paddling toward shore. The outgoing current made progress slow, and the water around them was streaked red. By the time they reached the shallows, several beachgoers had run into the water to help carry him up to the sand. Lifeguards and paramedics worked on Tyler for several minutes, but the injuries were catastrophic. Massive blood loss from the thigh wound and deep trauma to the abdomen. The bull shark's powerful jaws had inflicted wounds that no amount of medical intervention could overcome. He was declared dead at the scene at 8:02 a.m. His board was recovered later that morning, a crescent-shaped bite taken out of it. Local police marked the location, and experts confirmed it matched a bull shark's dentition. The council closed the beach for 48 hours, posting signs but holding no press conference. Tyler's funeral was held the following week in the small, weatherboard church inland from Ballina. The crowd was mostly family, old schoolmates, and fellow surfers, many of whom brought boards stacked along the fence in tribute. By the third day after his death, the advisory signs came down, and the river mouth was quiet again, except for the tide. Tyler's defiance of safety warnings proved fatal in the murky estuary waters. However, just 1 year earlier off the rocky shores of Molokai, a diver would descend into depths during turtle nesting season, unaware that a massive tiger shark was already tracking his movement. It was September 2nd, 2015, and the channel off Molokai's southern coast was calm and bright under the late morning sun. The water was glassy, with only a slight swell rolling toward the rocky shoreline. A single white skiff sat at anchor about 200 yards out, its hull barely rocking. From shore, it was quiet, except for the occasional call of a seabird and the slap of small waves against the basalt ledges. However, beneath that calm surface, something large was moving. Robert Kaleo, 41, was well known in the area as both a mechanic and a part-time commercial diver. He harvested lobsters and reef fish to sell locally, supplementing his shop work. Friends described him as skilled in the water, methodical, and used to working alone. His skiff was small but reliable, and he preferred solo trips to avoid splitting catches on busy ground. The routine was familiar. Anchor in a favored spot, dive with a hand net and catch bag, return before midday when winds picked up. The week had brought reports of more tiger shark sightings along the channel, a seasonal occurrence during turtle nesting. Kaleo's friend had warned him the night before to skip the deeper sections, especially alone. He shrugged it off. Clear weather and light current meant good diving conditions, and he had orders to fill before the weekend. That morning, he wore a full black wetsuit, weight belt, mask, and fin, with a half-full mesh catch bag clipped to his waist. The channel floor here dropped from reef shelf to deep sand, broken by scattered coral heads. Visibility was excellent, easily 60 feet. Small schools of goatfish moved over the bottom, and the occasional green turtle swam lazily toward the surface. Closer to shore, reef sharks were a common sight, but in the deeper sand channels, larger predators sometimes patrol. Tiger sharks can reach over 15 feet in length and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. They're opportunistic feeders capable of taking large prey, including turtles and fish caught in trap. In clear water, they often approach slowly from depth, closing the distance in short, sudden bursts. Their jaw strength allows them to shear through bone and shell with ease. These apex predators possess rows of serrated teeth designed to slice through flesh and bone, with a bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. At around 9:10 a.m., Kaleo surfaced near his skiff to check his position, resting briefly before taking another breath and descending toward the sand channel. A fisherman standing on shore watching the area with binoculars later reported seeing a large, dark shape moving toward the diver's location from the open side of the channel. It was well below the surface and closing in with predatory intent. Moments later, the stillness broke. A commotion of foam and spray erupted beside the skiff as Kaleo surfaced again, this time shouting in terror. A 14-foot tiger shark had come up from below and clamped onto his left arm just above the elbow, pulling him partly underwater. The shark's head was nearly as broad as Kaleo's chest. Its eyes rolled back and its pectoral fins angled downward, a sign of attack posture. The shark shook its head in powerful side-to-side motions, tearing through muscle and bone with devastating efficiency. Kaleo kicked hard and struck at the shark's snout with his free hand, but the grip didn't loosen. Predator's jaws were designed for exactly this purpose: to hold and dismember prey with mechanical precision. In one swift movement, the shark let go, then turned and bit again, this time clamping across his midsection. The motion folded him around its jaws before his body went limp. The attack was brutal and efficient. Tiger sharks are known for their ability to consume large prey, and their hunting technique involves multiple bites to incapacitate victims before consumption. The water around Kaleo turned crimson as the shark's serrated teeth did their work. His struggles grew weaker with each passing second as blood loss and trauma took their toll. The shark released him, sinking back into the clear water with slow, deliberate tail beat. The skiff drifted slightly in the current, its anchor rope still taut. Kaleo floated face up for a few seconds, his wetsuit torn and bloodied, before slipping beneath the surface into the depths that had claimed him. The fisherman watching the incident immediately accelerated toward shore while alerting the authorities on his mobile. Search crews arrived within the hour, launching from the harbor and sweeping the channel. By late afternoon, they recovered partial remains along with his mask and catch bag. The bag still held several lobsters, their antennae protruding through the mesh, a grim reminder of the routine dive that had turned deadly. Kaleo's funeral was held at a small community hall, attended by fewer than 50 people, mostly family and close friends. State officials issued a one-week advisory to avoid the channel, but made no further public statement. By the second week, fishermen were back along the same stretch, their skiffs anchored over the same deep sand where Robert Kaleo had met his fate. However, even as Robert Kaleo's dismissal of local warnings cost him his life just 1 year later in the open Atlantic east of Nassau, a mechanic would find himself alone in the ocean, his emergency beacon drawing not just rescue boat, but the attention of an oceanic white-tip. It was November 19, 2014, and the open Atlantic east of Nassau stretched endlessly under a fading sun. The horizon lay flat and unbroken, the water a deep cobalt that darkened toward the east. Beneath that calm surface, something moved, drawn by the faintest cues, patient and unseen. George Willoughby was a 58-year-old British-born yacht mechanic who had called Florida home for over 2 decades. He earned his living maintaining and moving private vessels between the U.S. and the Bahamas, work that combined steady income with stretches of solitude at sea. Friends knew him as cautious and detail-oriented, comfortable taking solo deliveries for smaller boats, especially on routes he knew well. That week, he was ferrying a 34-foot sailboat to Nassau for a seasonal charter client. The trip had proceeded smoothly until afternoon, when a sudden hull breach began flooding the vessel. The damage likely came from striking a submerged object, and Willoughby's attempts to patch the breach failed as the bilge pump couldn't keep pace with the incoming water. He transmitted a distress call and prepared to abandon ship. Wearing his bright orange life jacket, he secured his emergency beacon and stepped off the stern into the water as the bow began its descent. What Willoughby faced in those waters was one of the ocean's most persistent predators. Oceanic white-tip sharks represent millions of years of evolutionary perfection for open water hunting. These massive predators can exceed 10 feet in length and weigh over 400 pounds. Their distinctive white-tipped fins and broad pectoral fins make them unmistakable. But it's their behavior that makes them truly dangerous. Unlike coastal sharks that hunt in specific territories, oceanic whitetips are nomadic hunters, capable of swimming vast distances without rest. They're drawn to floating objects and distressed prey, often appearing seemingly from nowhere in the middle of empty ocean. The state of the sea remained moderate, with long, slow swells and clear visibility stretching to the horizon. No land was visible in any direction. Willoughby floated in his life jacket, the emergency beacon transmitting his location to rescue services. The bright orange fabric and reflective strips that made them visible to potential rescuers also created the perfect visual cue for predators lurking in the depths below. The emergency beacon signal reached a nearby fishing vessel, bringing them onto a direct course toward Willoughby's position. The crew estimated 15 minutes to reach him. From their wheelhouse, they spotted the glint of his life jacket and something else. A dark triangular fin cutting through the surface approximately 150 feet away. The shark's approach was methodical, its dorsal fin appearing and disappearing as it circled closer. Oceanic whitetips are known for their bold, investigative nature. Unlike other shark species that might make a quick strike and retreat, these predators are persistent. They circle their target repeatedly, each pass bringing them closer, testing for weakness or opportunity. Their hunting strategy has been perfected over countless encounters with shipwreck survivors and marine animals in distress. At less than 30 feet, the shark struck with explosive force. The fishing crew watched in horror as Willoughby was lifted momentarily above the surface before crashing back down, the water erupting around him in white foam. The first bite seized his right side near the rib, the shark's powerful jaws clamping down with over 600 pounds of pressure per square inch. Willoughby screamed and fought desperately, his legs kicking frantically as he tried to push the massive predator away. The shark released its grip and veered off, beginning another slow, deliberate circle. This behavior is typical of oceanic whitetip. They rarely make a single strike. Instead, they test their prey, inflicting damage before returning for a more decisive attack. Blood now streamed from Willoughby's wound, creating an expanding crimson cloud in the blue water that would only attract the predator more intensely. The shark turned sharply and closed the distance again, this time targeting his shoulder. The impact rolled Willoughby onto his back as the predator's teeth tore through flesh and bone. He struggled to break free, but the shark's grip was absolute. The creature's streamlined body, weighing several hundred pounds, easily overpowered his desperate attempts at escape. Seconds later, the shark dragged him beneath the surface in a violent death roll, leaving only a churning mass of bubbles and blood-streaked foam. The attack had lasted less than 2 minutes from first strike to final submersion. By the time the fishing vessel reached the location, the water had returned to its deceptive calm. Willoughby's life jacket floated nearby, the right side torn open and stained with blood. A single deck shoe drifted just beneath the surface, slowly sinking toward the abyss. No other trace of the man remained. The crew searched the area for over an hour, hoping against hope to find some sign of survival. But the ocean had claimed another victim. Crew alerted the authorities, but the search and rescue team scoured the area for another 2 weeks before calling it off. George Willoughby's funeral was held quietly in Florida, attended by family and colleagues from the marina where he had worked for years. The service was brief, with a handful of stories shared about his reliability at sea. Bahamian maritime officials issued no public statement about the incident, and the tragedy passed largely unnoticed outside local boating circles. In the absence of official report, details of the attack circulated only by word of mouth among fishermen and marina workers. Willoughby's distress beacon had drawn the deadly curiosity of a white tip in the open Atlantic. And just 1 year earlier off the coast of Cape Cod, a seasoned deckhand would lean over the gunwale to check his bait line, unaware that a mako shark was already preparing to bite. It was July 8, 2013. The morning dawned clear and warm over the Atlantic waters east of Cape Cod. A gentle breeze carried the scent of chum across the deck of the Miss Caitlin, a 38-foot charter vessel working a productive bluefish run. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, its surface calm enough to reveal the ominous shadow of a predator circling beneath the boat. Michael Russo stood on the deck, salt spray misting his weathered face as he worked the line. The 32-year-old fisherman had spent 3 summers working charters out of Provincetown, earning a reputation for his skill with heavy tackle and his ability to gaff even the largest tuna without complaint. His colleagues respected his steady hands and calm demeanor, qualities that had served him well in the unpredictable world of offshore fishing. That morning, Captain Jim Morrison had taken the Miss Caitlin out with 3 paying clients, following reports of good fishing along the continental shelf. The boat worked a slick of bait that drifted down current, creating an oily trail that attracted both the desired bluefish and less welcome visitors from the depth. What Michael likely didn't fully comprehend was the nature of the predator that had been stalking their vessel since mid-morning. Mako sharks represent one of the ocean's most perfectly evolved killing machines, capable of reaching speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour in short bursts. These apex predators can grow over 12 feet long and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. Their streamlined bodies are built for explosive acceleration, and their razor-sharp teeth are designed to slice through flesh and bone with surgical precision. The shark had first appeared around 10 in the morning, drawn by the steady stream of chum and baitfish that trailed behind the charter boat. Its slate blue back cut through the surface in increasingly tight circles, each pass bringing it closer to the vessel. The massive predator would disappear beneath the waves for minutes at a time, only to resurface even nearer, its dorsal fin slicing through the water with predatory intent. From his position at the helm, Captain Morrison watched the shark's erratic movements through his polarized sunglasses. Recognizing the signs of an agitated predator, he called down to his crew, warning them to stay well back from the gunwale. The fish was wound up, he told them, its behavior becoming increasingly unpredictable as it fed on the chum slick. Michael was crouched near the port side of the vessel, checking a bait line that had become tangled. He held his gaff in one hand while leaning over the side to adjust the swivel that had snagged on the rigging. The experienced fisherman had performed this routine maintenance countless times before, but on this morning, he was unaware of the massive predator positioning itself directly beneath them. In a spectacular vertical burst, the Mako shark exploded from the water. The shark's lower jaw struck Michael square in the chest with devastating force, driving razor-sharp teeth through his ribs and deep into his abdomen. The impact knocked Michael flat onto the deck, his gaff skittering across the wet plank as blood began pooling beneath his torn body. The shark landed partially aboard the Miss Caitlin, its powerful tail thrashing violently as it fought to return to the water. Captain Morrison grabbed a steel pipe and struck the shark repeatedly, each blow bouncing harmlessly off its slippery hide. The Mako's prehistoric strength was overwhelming, its thrashing threatening to damage the boat's equipment and injure other crew members. With a final surge of power, the massive predator wriggled back over the side and vanished into the churned wake. Michael lay motionless on his back, his shirt torn open to reveal the devastating wounds across his chest and abdomen. His breathing became increasingly shallow as blood loss took its toll. Despite the captain's frantic radio calls for emergency assistance, the nearest Coast Guard cutter was still miles away when Michael drew his final breath. Michael Russo's funeral in Provincetown drew dozens of local fishermen, charter captains, and family members who had known him as a skilled and reliable crew member. The service was held at a small harborside chapel with the smell of salt air drifting in through open doors as friends shared quiet stories about his calm presence at sea. Following the incident, the Coast Guard conducted a standard investigation, interviewing the captain, passengers, and other vessels in the area. State Marine officials reviewed the case but issued no new safety guidelines, noting the rarity of such an event. Thanks for watching. If these bloody stories of animal attacks entertained you, click here for more.